Some people think their biggest problem is money. They hear it on the news, from friends, in endless personal finance articles. Save more, budget better, earn more. But the truth is, that's a lie we've been told so many times, it's almost invisible. The real problem isn't money. It's something far more subtle, far more powerful, and far more insidious. It's the invisible structure that dictates how Americans live, spend, and think, and it's what keeps so many people trapped, exhausted, and constantly chasing relief that never comes. Let's start by looking at a typical American life. Most people wake up, get ready, and head to work not just to earn, but to maintain a life they've been told is normal. The house, the car, the bills, the little luxuries that seem harmless, they all add up. And over time, they transform a decent paycheck into a tightrope act. You might earn $60,000, $70,000, or even $100,000 a year, and still feel like there's never enough. You might feel lucky, but at the same time, stressed. And no matter how hard you work, the margin, the breathing space that lets you feel secure rarely appears. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Americans don't struggle because they can earn more. They struggle because the system quietly converts income into obligation, expectation, and emotional pressure. Rent, mortgages, car payments, subscriptions, medical bills, commuting costs, childcare, these aren't just expenses, they're chains disguised as choices. And when your life is structured this way, every dollar you earn becomes a ticket to maintain your position rather than a tool for growth. Consider how debt is framed in America. From student loans to car loans, the narrative is that debt is normal, acceptable, even necessary. You need it to build a future, to climb the ladder, to prove responsibility. And that sounds reasonable until you realize what happens over time. Debt becomes a mechanism that reduces flexibility, increases stress, and forces constant prioritization of income over opportunity. Every extra dollar you earn is immediately swallowed by an obligation you once thought would propel you forward. And that's why more income rarely feels like relief, it often just increases your responsibilities. Another factor is lifestyle inflation. Americans are social creatures, wired to compare themselves to neighbors, friends, and colleagues. A raise at work doesn't just translate into more savings, it translates into a bigger apartment, a newer car, a more expensive routine, and often more hidden stress. What feels like progress on paper actually reinforces the same invisible constraints that make money feel insufficient. It's a subtle trap. You earn more, you spend more, and yet freedom, security, and peace remain out of reach. This is compounded by the illusion of control. Many Americans believe that budgeting, cutting expenses, or tracking every dollar will solve their problem. And those things help marginally, yes, but they do not address the root issue. You can optimize spending, meal prep, cancel subscriptions, refinance loans, and still feel trapped. Why? Because the problem isn't your habits, it's the framework of your life itself. Your life is designed to absorb your income, and the choices you make, even responsible ones, are feeding the very structure that confines you. Let's make this real. Imagine a family making $80,000 a year. On paper, that should be comfortable. But in reality, they pay $1,800 for rent, $600 for childcare, $400 for groceries, $400 for insurance, $300 for transportation, and another $300 for miscellaneous bills. That's already $3,800 a month before taxes, leaving barely enough to cover savings, unexpected expenses, or emergencies. They might earn more next year, but their rent increases, childcare costs rise, groceries cost more, and suddenly, the extra income disappears into the same cycle. It's a treadmill disguised as progress, and most people never see it coming. Psychologically, this is exhausting. Humans are wired to chase improvement. You get a raise, a bonus, a promotion, and your brain signals success. But the system is designed to absorb those signals and neutralize them emotionally. You feel like you're improving, but the reality is unchanged. Stress, tension, and worry about the next unexpected expense remain constant. And over time, you internalize the problem as personal failure, not as the predictable outcome of a system that transforms income into obligation. Another invisible mechanism is expectation. Society, media, and peers constantly reinforce what normal life should look like. A decent car, a house in a good neighborhood, vacations, dinners out, gadgets, clothing. These expectations are subtle yet powerful. Even if you earn enough to cover essentials comfortably, the pressure to maintain a socially acceptable standard creates continuous friction. And when your attention is constantly split between maintaining appearances and handling real obligations, money feels insufficient no matter how much you earn. Healthcare is another silent contributor. Even with insurance, Americans often pay thousands annually for premiums, deductibles, copays, and prescriptions. One unexpected hospital visit can wipe out months of income, and this isn't rare, it's normal. Add the psychological stress of potential medical emergencies to the structural absorption of income, and you have a system that constantly tests your financial resilience, ensuring that stability always feels fragile. Let's talk about time as a cost. Many Americans don't realize how much their schedule is dictated by the invisible obligations tied to money. Long commutes, work hours, childcare, appointments, errands, they all consume time that could otherwise be spent building skills, pursuing opportunities, or creating experiences. Time becomes a silent tax on freedom. Money alone cannot buy it back, which is why even a higher salary rarely translates into feeling freer or more in control. The real problem Americans face then is structural and psychological, not financial in the traditional sense. It's about the invisible systems that convert effort into obligation, reward into constraint, and income into tension. It's about a culture that normalizes debt, lifestyle inflation, and constant consumption while praising compliance, reliability, and predictability. Most importantly, it's about the way this structure silently conditions behavior, shaping choices in ways that make freedom and flexibility feel risky, irresponsible, or impossible. And here's why it hurts so much. This problem disguises itself as normality. Unlike traditional financial crises, there's no crash, no dramatic failure, no single event that signals the trap. Instead, it creeps in quietly through promotions, raises, housing upgrades, car loans, and lifestyle changes that feel justified, step by step, decision by decision. Americans are taught to value stability over autonomy, security over freedom, and appearance over control. It's not that Americans are bad with money, far from it. They work hard, plan, and sacrifice. They earn decent salaries, save diligently, and try to make responsible choices. The problem is that the life structure they're operating in absorbs every advantage, neutralizes every improvement, and keeps them running in place. And psychologically, this is devastating, because it convinces people that if only they tried harder, if only they made one more cut, one more side hustle, one more optimization, relief would finally arrive. But it never does, not fully, not in the way that feels meaningful. And this leads to a subtle, pervasive exhaustion. Every decision is heavy. Every expense, even minor, carries weight. Every social expectation becomes a quiet anchor. Americans live in a state of constant vigilance, not because they're irresponsible, but because the structure of their life demands it. And as this stress accumulates over years and decades, it creates a feedback loop. The more pressure, the more conservative the choices, the tighter the obligations, the less freedom feels possible. By the end of it, most Americans aren't living paycheck to paycheck because they're careless. They're living paycheck to paycheck because life is designed to work that way. They're not failing, they're participating in a system that quietly absorbs success, stability, and income, converting them into perpetual constraint. And the worst part, it feels like the normal, responsible, expected way to live. The first step to breaking this cycle is recognizing that the problem isn't your money habits, it's the system itself. Awareness shifts perspective. Understanding that stability and progress can be traps, that income can be absorbed rather than leveraged, and that freedom is a function of structure rather than earnings, is where real change begins. Once you see the invisible mechanisms, you can start designing your life differently. And that's where the real hope comes in. This problem is solvable, but it requires seeing through the illusion, questioning normality, and intentionally creating structures that prioritize control, flexibility, and leverage over mere survival. Because the real problem Americans face isn't lack of money, it's how their money, effort, and life are structured to maintain constraint, not freedom. Once you recognize that Americans don't actually have a money problem, the next question becomes unavoidable. So what is the real problem? And the answer is uncomfortable, because it challenges the story people rely on to feel safe. The real problem is that Americans are trapped in a fragile life design, one that works only as long as everything goes right. The moment something shifts, the entire structure starts to shake. This fragility is intentional, even if no one consciously designed it that way. American life is built around continuous performance. You must keep earning, keep producing, keep showing up at the same level. Your lifestyle depends on consistency, not growth. And when consistency becomes non-negotiable, freedom quietly disappears. You're not free to slow down, you're not free to pivot, you're not free to experiment. Because every obligation in your life assumes that tomorrow will look exactly like today. The system trains people to confuse reliability with success. Being dependable, stable, and predictable is rewarded. Employers value it. Banks finance it. Society praises it. But reliability has a hidden cost. It locks you into narrow paths. When your identity, income, and obligations are all aligned around being reliable, deviation becomes dangerous. Even positive risks start to feel irresponsible. And that's how people get stuck, not through failure, but through compliance. One of the clearest signs of this problem is how Americans relate to emergencies. An emergency shouldn't feel like a personal crisis, it should be an inconvenience. But for most people, one unexpected expense can derail months of progress. That's not because they're careless, it's because their lives are built without margin. Every dollar has a job before it arrives. There's no slack in the system. And systems without slack always collapse under pressure. Another sign is how raises and promotions fail to change emotional reality. More income should create relief. Instead, it often creates new obligations that cancel out the benefit. The job becomes more demanding. The lifestyle becomes more expensive. The the expectations increase, and the person stays in the same emotional place, tense, alert, cautious. When progress doesn't feel like progress, something deeper is broken. This problem is reinforced by how Americans are taught to think about risk. Risk is framed as recklessness. Stability is framed as virtue. But in reality, avoiding all risk creates a different kind of danger. Long-term dependence. When your life has no room for uncertainty, it also has no room for transformation. You can't redesign your path if every decision must protect the current setup. And here's the psychological twist. People internalize this fragility as personal anxiety. They feel restless, burned out, or unmotivated without understanding why. They assume they're ungrateful or weak. They don't realize that their nervous system is responding to constant low-level threat. When your survival depends on uninterrupted income, your body never fully relaxes. You're always one problem away from disruption. That state becomes normal, but it's not healthy. Another layer of the problem is how Americans are encouraged to solve structural stress with personal optimization. Budget better, wake up earlier, hustle more, track everything. These strategies treat symptoms, not causes. They help you function inside a fragile structure, but they don't make it resilient. In fact, they often reinforce fragility by demanding perfection just to stay afloat. Fragile systems punish mistakes harshly. There's no room to be human. A missed paycheck, a health issue, a family emergency, suddenly everything feels at risk. And when people live inside systems like that, they become conservative, anxious, and resistant to change. Not because they lack courage, but because their margin is gone. This is why so many Americans feel paralyzed. They sense that something isn't working, but every alternative feels unsafe. Staying feels suffocating. Leaving feels reckless. That's not indecision, it's structural paralysis. The system creates conditions where movement feels impossible, even when staying is painful. What makes this worse is that the fragility is invisible. From the outside, everything looks fine. Bills are paid, careers are progressing, lives appear stable. But stability without margin is not security, it's tension. And tension, sustained over years, becomes exhaustion. The real problem, then, isn't money itself. It's a life designed with no buffer, no flexibility, and no room to adapt. Americans are not broke, they're constrained. They're not failing, they're over-optimized for a narrow version of success that collapses under pressure. And until that design is questioned, no increase in income will fix the problem. No budget will create peace. No promotion will restore freedom. Because the issue isn't how much money comes in, it's how tightly life is engineered around needing it to never stop. In the final block, we're going to talk about what actually changes this. Not hacks, not shortcuts, but the principles that turn a fragile life into a resilient one, and how Americans can rebuild margin, flexibility, and control without blowing up everything they've worked for. Because the opposite of fragility isn't wealth. If you're American and this feels uncomfortably familiar, there's nothing wrong with you. That's the first thing that needs to be said clearly. You're not bad with money. You're not behind. You're not broken. What you're feeling is a rational response to living inside a system that demands constant output while offering very little breathing room. Anyone inside that system would feel the same tension. And here's the uncomfortable truth. There is no magic exit. No single decision that suddenly restores freedom. No income number where everything clicks into place. Anyone selling that story is lying, or selling hope disguised as strategy. Real change is slower, quieter, and far less glamorous. The goal isn't to escape the system. Most people can't, and pretending otherwise creates shame. The real goal is to reduce fragility, to slowly redesign life so that one problem doesn't threaten everything. That's not about getting rich. It's about building margin, financial, emotional, and psychological. Margin is what allows mistakes without catastrophe. It's what turns emergencies into inconveniences. And margin doesn't come from extreme discipline or constant hustle. It comes from resisting the pressure to optimize life for appearances and instead optimizing it for resilience. That often means saying no to things that look like progress but increase dependency. One of the hardest shifts is redefining success. In America, success is visible: the house, the car, the lifestyle. But real security is invisible. It's flexibility, it's options, it's knowing that if something changes, you won't collapse. That kind of security often looks boring. It doesn't impress anyone, and that's why it's rare. Another hard truth: some discomfort is unavoidable. Reducing fragility often means living slightly below what you could technically afford. It means tolerating the feeling of being behind socially so you can be ahead structurally. That trade-off is emotionally difficult, because it goes against everything people are praised for. But stability built on appearances is fragile. Stability built on margin is quiet and strong. This isn't about cutting all joy or living in fear. It's about understanding that convenience has a cost, and every recurring obligation narrows future choices. The question isn't, can I afford this now? It's, what does this require from me every month, every year, indefinitely? That shift alone changes everything. And let's be honest, none of this is easy. When you're already tired, already stretched, already anxious, long-term thinking feels impossible. That's why so many people stay stuck, not because they don't understand the problem, but because they don't have the energy to fight it. Compassion matters here. especially self-compassion. It's also important to say this clearly. Resilience doesn't mean immunity. Life will still be hard. Costs will rise. Stress won't disappear. But there's a difference between stress that challenges you and stress that threatens your foundation. The first is part of being alive. The second slowly erodes you. The most dangerous lie Americans believe is that feeling constantly on edge is normal. It's common, but it's not normal. Living in a permanent state of alert is not a personal failure. It's a warning sign, a signal that life has been engineered too tightly around uninterrupted performance. Real progress often looks like small, uncelebrated decisions, fewer commitments, slightly more cash on hand, more flexibility in how income is earned, more honesty about what actually brings peace versus what just signals success. None of this makes you impressive, but it makes you safer. And safety changes how you think. When you're not constantly bracing for impact, creativity returns, patience returns, perspective returns. You stop reacting and start choosing. That's not freedom in the dramatic sense, but it's the kind that lasts. So no, Americans don't have a money problem. They have a fragility problem, a life design problem. And fixing it doesn't require brilliance, luck, or extreme wealth. It requires awareness, restraint, and the courage to prioritize resilience over validation. This isn't a call to quit your job or reject society. It's a call to stop confusing pressure with progress, to stop believing that tension is the price of adulthood, and to start building a life that can bend without breaking, because the real measure of success isn't how much you earn, it's how well your life holds together when things don't go as planned, and that's something no guru can sell you.